Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to 2025. Today is our kickoff for our 2025 Sew With Me series. So welcome back to my channel, everyone. I'm so happy to see you all in this new year. If you are unfamiliar with the Sew With Me series, it's a sew-along series that we do here together on YouTube. I am going to be showing you how to sew 12 different scrappy quilt blocks, and then we'll put them all together in a really fun setting. So these are tutorials. They're great for beginners. We've done this 2 previous times. I skipped it last year, and I had so many requests that I decided to go ahead and bring it back for this year. I'll put links on where you can get the 2021 into 2022 Sew With Me, and then the 2023 Sew With Me. The first one we did is right here on my quilt ladder behind me. It was a lot of fun, and hopefully you guys learned a lot. So I highly recommend checking out those previous years as well. All of the blocks are finishing at the same size. They're all 12.5-inch finishes, so you can actually mix and match blocks from previous years if you don't love all the blocks in this year, and vice versa. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. I have a couple housekeeping items so that you can refer back to this video if you have any questions. Number 1, fabric requirements and everything you need for the entire year's sew along will be in my blog post. I will put a link on where you can get that information below. It will also be in the free PDF download for today's video as well. After today's video, I won't be adding it to every single one as we go because that's just a lot of printing for you guys. Number 2, make sure to join our Sew With Me group on Facebook. It is a private group, so we don't have a bunch of spammers in there, and it's everybody just sharing their projects as we sew along together. So I'll put a link for that below this video as well. For each video that I upload, there will be a free PDF download as well. That includes all of your cutting instructions and assembly instructions for each block. For this one, we are going to be doing a pieced backing. You can skip that. It is optional, but it's really cute, so I think you're going to want to do it. If you haven't already, pre-starch your fabric, or you can also use Mary Ellen's Best Press as we go. We're doing a lot of flying geese and things like that in this year's sew along, and so this is going to be your friend as far as keeping your fabrics stable and not too stretchy and getting distorted as you're sewing. But I'll mention this in each of the individual videos, and it will also be linked in the requirements information on the blog post. The only other things you're going to need are some fun fabric, your sewing machine, and an iron. I'm going to share my fabric with you today, but I also suggest that you dive into your scrap bins for these Sew With Me blocks. These sampler quilts are a great way to bust through some of your stash. So I'm actually using leftovers that I have from my Believe collection from my Christmas Spools quilt. I'm not going to dig into this one. I am trying to keep one fat quarter bundle of all of the lines that I released just so that I have a memory of them. But I do have a bunch of scraps left over from this line, and I'm going to be using that for my quilt. And then for the backing and binding, I haven't 100% decided yet. I think I'm going to use this red gingham. This is also from that same line, and I do believe I have enough of this to get my binding. I also have a bunch of scraps left over from my house print, so I am going to try and use this for my backing. I might have to do some creative piecing for mine, we'll see. So I have to do a little bit of math and see if I have enough of this to use for my backing. So I am really getting scrappy and creative with this year's quilt. I will have full fabric requirements for this entire quilt if you would like to not be scrappy, and then yardage wise you will just need some for your outer border, your binding, and your backing. But all of the fabric requirements for the entire quilt will be included in the PDF for today's video. So we're going to go ahead and get started with today's video. I'm going to actually upload 2 videos back to back because I don't want it to get too long. We're going to start this one off slightly differently. We are going to make our sashing and our outer borders first, and I'll show you why. We have a really cool layout for this year's sew along, and that is something I've been doing that is new. I have been cutting all of my borders and sashing strips first before I start working on the blocks for a quilt. That way you won't run out of that fabric, or not run out, but just cut into your border, making you have to cut, say, 2 small border pieces instead of an entire width of fabric. So we're going to work on our borders, our special borders today, and then in the next video we'll be working on block number 1. So I'm going to show you a little sample of what the layout's going to look like. I have blurred out all of the blocks that are not releasing yet so you can see what we're doing and get the vision for what the finished quilt is going to look like. So as you can see right here, we've got a cute little bow at the very top of our quilt, and the bowstrings will be hanging down into block number 2 and going right through that sashing and into block number 2. too. So I think it's going to be really, really cute when we're all done. And then all of the other blocks surrounding it will be surrounded by that cute sashing. Now I'm doing a light brown sashing with dark brown around the edges and then a red in the center. It's kind of giving it a gingerbread effect for me, but if you want to use a different color scheme instead of Christmas, I just recommend that you do something that is the same color but lighter and darker. So if you wanted to do a patriotic theme, I think that would be really fun. So you would want to do a lighter blue for your sashing, a darker blue on the ends, and then maybe even still a red for those cornerstones. I think that would be really cool as well. But we have a little bow right here at the top of the quilt. It's going to be really cute. That's what we're working on today along with the sashing. So today we're going to be making our bows, and we're going to use one of these bows for the front and one for our pieced backing. You'll see the blocks that go with the bows when we get to block number 2. We're going to make both block number 2 and the pieced backing block, and you'll see it'll all make sense when we get to that. But today we're going to be making 2 of these bows. If you don't want to do the pieced backing, just make one of the bows. One thing that you need to pay attention, and I'll mention it again, is that for the backing fabric, my white color here, for the front bow, you're going to want to use whatever fabric you want for your outer border, and then for the back bow, you're going to want to use your backing fabric for your background. Hopefully that makes sense. It's all in the pattern as well. So we're going to make 2 of these bow units. The other thing we're going to make is a special sashing unit. This is going to go with our bow unit, and as you can see, we've got those red and pink there for the ribbons hanging down off the bow. And then we're going to make our regular sashing units. These look like you're going to have to sew a bunch of them, but we're actually going to strip piece these, so they're going to go really, really fast. So to get started sewing, I am going to use a couple supplies, and I'm just going to mention these in the first video, and then we'll be using these same supplies throughout the series. So you'll obviously want some kind of a cutting mat, self-healing cutting mat. I have this one underneath here. This is my big mat, rotary mat. I will link that one. And then I just have this smaller one. This is from Fat Quarter Shop, and I will link this below as well, but it doesn't really matter which kind you use. I also have a couple rulers that I like to use. You can use whatever you have, but I'm going to share what I'll be using. So I use All Creative Grids rulers. This one is my 12.5 by 12.5 inch ruler. This is great because our blocks are all finishing at 12.5 by 12.5, so it'll make it really easy to square them up. I also like to use this 6.5 by 12.5 inch ruler, super handy for smaller pieces. Again, the correct width. And then I also love using my 6.5 by 6.5 square ruler. I use this when we're trimming up small things, flying geese, anything that's just a little bit smaller. I don't want to use my big ruler for. So these are the 3 I'll be using. Again, you can use whatever you have. You're also going to be needing a 45mm rotary trimmer. This is my Olfa. I love this brand. Doesn't matter what brand you use though. You'll also want some sort of a pressing mat. This pressing mat is something I made myself. I do have a video on YouTube for it as well, so you can check that out. I also like these little design boards. This one's a little bit small for our blocks. I need to make a larger one, but I have a video on how to make these as well. And also Fat Quarter Shop sells these if you don't feel like making them. And then I like to use the Alpha Biddies to label my pieces. So as you can see, I have all my pieces for our first block here cut out and labeled. This makes it really easy. When the pattern tells you to grab piece A, you can grab piece A. It just keeps everything nice and organized. You'll also obviously need your sewing machine and some sort of pressing device. I'll be using my Laura Star steam iron. This is the Lift Titan. You can use any iron you like, but this is the one you will be seeing in all the videos this year, and I will make sure to link this one below as well. And the other thing new to me this year that I will be using is this. This is my 12-inch pressing tailor's clapper. This is from Modern American Vintage. It's a literal work of art, but not only is it beautiful, it's also functional. The other side is just plain wood, and when you're pressing your finished block, you just set this on top of it, let it cool, and your finished block comes out nice and flat. So I will be using this all season long as well. If you don't have something like that, you can always use regular size tailor clappers. This just helps keep your seams flat. This is from Riley Blake. I have it in a couple different sizes, and then this beautiful one right here is again from Modern American Vintage, and this was made after my Harvest quilt from 2024. So it's beautiful, but I love using these. They're perfect for keeping your seams nice and flat. The only other thing we'll be using this year are some pins. It's always nice to have a pin bowl handy. And this is a magnetic one. This one is from Fat Quarter Shop. And these are the little house pins. They're nice and sharp, so they're easy to use and they don't leave big holes in your fabric. So I think that's everything we're gonna be using supply-wise for this season's sew along. All right, let's get started with today's tutorial. So we're going to start out by putting together our bow block and our sashing blocks. Now you're going to need 2 bow blocks. I'm only going to make 1 in this video, and I just want to make sure to note that the fabric we're going to be using for the background for our bow block needs to be the fabric that you would like on the outside border of your quilt, because this bow is going to sit above all of your other blocks. And when you're making the back bow, make sure you're using your backing fabric. That way it'll all blend together, and when you put it together, it'll look like the bow is just sitting on top of the block and not like a separate unit. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. I have all my pieces cut out. They're labeled and ready to go. And we're gonna start off by working with our H, D, and I units. And the first thing we're going to do is take our D unit, place it in the middle. You should have 4 I units, and we're just going to sew these together in a row, and we're gonna make 2 of those. All right, so now we have those 2 pieces done, and then we just need to sew our tops and bottoms on. So this is piece H. One's going to go on the top and bottom. Same with this. So we're just going to make 2 identical units. And now I just press them and then I go ahead and trim them apart. You can trim them apart first if you prefer. And then here are our 2 bow units. Now I do like to square things up as I go, so we need to trim these to 5 by 4. They should be relatively accurate. But if I have any extra, I'll just go ahead and trim that off. So just the tiniest bit off that one. And just a teeny tiny bit off that one. Next, we're going to be using our B squares, and we are going to sew our B squares onto 3 sides of these. And so I like to go ahead and lay them next to each other so I know which sides. So we're going to go on the outer corners and then one on the inner top corner, just like this. And then we're just going to sew diagonally from corner to corner. Just follow the diagram in your pattern so that we have snowballed 3 of our bow corners. Don't snowball this bottom inside corner. If you'd like, you can draw lines from corner to corner on the wrong side of these pieces so you know which way to go. I'm going to go ahead and just do that at my sewing machine. All right, and now we have these, and I like to go ahead and just finger press those back just to make sure that my seam was on the line and I didn't get too short on my corner and end up with something, you know, like this. So you just want to make sure that they look good before you trim them off. And then we're going to trim 1/4 of an inch away from our stitch line. And sometimes I cheat and I do 2 like this. You just want to make sure you have them all going the correct way. Okay, and then we just need to press these. And this one looks a little bit wonky after I pressed it, so I will just trim these up to make sure they're the size they're supposed to be. So again, the original unit was 5 by 4, so this unit should also be 5 by 4. And oh, it's not too bad. But whenever you're snowballing corners like that, things can get a little bit wonky, so I do like to just straighten them up. All right, so here are our bow units ready to go. We can set those aside. We're going to work on the piece that goes down in the center. So we're going to work with our J and E units. We're going to take our 2 J units and we're going to place an E square on the bottom inner corner, just like this. And then we're going to sew from corner to corner in opposite directions, just like that. And this time we're going to press in opposite directions because these 2 pieces are getting sewn together. Again, I'm going to trim this up before I move on. And I apologize, I showed you this way earlier, but they need to be turned this way. It doesn't matter. Just as long as you snowball one of the corners in opposite directions, you'll be good. So now we're going to sew them together. I have pressed one to the red and one to the white so that those seams will nest when we sew them together. So we're going to sew these 2 together, and then we're going to come back and add the G to the top of that and the C to the top of that, and that will be the center of our bow unit. And then here we have our bow unit. So we've got our center and our 2 sides. We're going to go ahead and sew those together. Just make sure that your outer bow units are turned the correct way. So I'm going to go ahead and just place this one right side down, sew 1/4 of an inch, and then I'll come back and add our right. Next, we just need to add our A strip to the top of our bow unit. So again, just right sides together, 1/4 of an inch down this edge. So here is what the finished bow unit should look like. I realize it looks a little weird now, but it's going to be really cute later. So you're going to make 2 of these. So you're going to set your backing bow aside. You're going to take your front bow, which is what we just made in this video. We're going to take our F strips and we're just going to sew 1 F unit to either side of that bow. So one to the left and 1 to the right. We're going to just press towards that outer border and then we can set this unit aside. So for the sashing, I'm not going to do a full tutorial on the sashing. All the information is in the pattern, but I did want to just share with you a little bit about strip piecing. So in the pattern, it's going to have you cut a piece that is 10.5 high by width of fabric long, and that would be 42 inches. I have mine cut shorter just so I can show you on today's video. And then you're going to cut 2 strips that are 1.5 inch tall by width of fabric long. 1.5 by width of fabric. And then we're going to just sew those strips together, right sides together, and press. And I just pressed towards this brown, towards the darker color. And I'm doing my sashing a light brown with a darker brown. You can do this any color you want. To get the plaid look, you're just going to want to have a lighter color and then darker color on the outside. So you could have a light blue with a darker blue, like a pink with a red, a light green with a dark green, however you want to do it. Just make sure that these strips are just a darker shade of the same color that you're using for the main length of your strip. You're going to sew those together just like I did here, and then we're going to just trim them. And then whenever I strip piece like this, I always just place my ruler right along the edge and just straighten up this first edge. And as you'll see, I barely cut off any, but that just gives me a straight edge to work for. And then they need to be 1.5 inches wide. So you're going to have a piece that's 12.5 by 1.5, and those are going to be your sashing units. And so I'll just go down this now and just cut my pieces to 1.5 inches wide. And if you have a stripology ruler, that's perfect for this as well. I don't have one of those, so I'm just going to use this ruler. But you can see that we just sewed 2 long strips together, and now we can get all of our little sashing strips out of that simply by cutting them. It makes it a lot faster and easier to make several of these sashing strips. The quantity you're going to need is all in the pattern. How long to cut all these pieces, all in the pattern. I just wanted to show you how to sew those together and then trim them off to make your sashing in a much faster and easier method. So I'll finish cutting these up, and then we're going to move on to our special sashing and bow block. All right, so I have all of my plain sashing strips done, and I'm just going to set these aside, leave those. We're going to be making 2 special sashing units, and these are actually going to be for the blocks that include our bows. If you don't want to do the pieced backing, you're only going to make 1 of these units. If you do want to do the pieced backing, you need to make 2 of these. And one thing that we want to make sure is that we pick a red and a pink that is the same as what we're going to be using for our bow block. That way these will match the ribbons that hang down onto the block. Again, all of the cutting measurements and everything are going to be in your pattern, so check that. We're going to take our B3 squares and we're going to take 1 of our D squares, and we're going to place that right side down on the right end, and we're going to sew from corner to corner. We're also going to take another one. We're going to place our other D square to the right end of that, and we're going to sew corner to corner this way. So we're making a left and a right unit. We're going to trim 1/4 inch away and then press that open. Again, I'm using my 1/4 inch tape here, but you could also draw a line from corner to corner if you don't have this tape on your machine. All right, so I've made 2 lefts and 2 rights. We're making 2 of these units again. I'm going to trim 1/4 inch away from my stitch line, and we're going to press these. I'm going to go ahead and set those there. Now we're going to make our next unit. So we're going to be taking our C squares. Again, we're going to be making 2 of these. So this is going to be for my back bow. This is going to be for my front bow. We're going to take a D square and place it on the left side of one of them and the right side of the other. And then we are going to sew according to our diagram, which is from corner to corner this way on this one, and corner to corner this way on our right pieces. I'm actually going to stack these to trim them because it'll just be easier. Again, we're trimming 1/4 inch away from our stitch line. I'm going to take these over here and just press. Alrighty, so we've got these two completed, and then we've got these two completed. Next, we're going to take our B3 pieces, and this should be the lighter color that you're using, and we're going to place those right side down, and we're going to follow the same diagonal as we did on the previous pieces. So just like that, and then opposite on this one. And so this, on these two, we're going to be going this direction. The next step before we move on is I always like to trim up my pieces, and whenever you are snowballing a corner of a piece, one of my little tricks is to use the piece that wasn't snowballed as your main guide. So these need to finish at 3.5 by 1.5, so I'm going to place my ruler right on there, and I'm using these lines as my guide, and then anything from my little snowballed corner over here that's sticking out, I'll trim off. Mine actually looks pretty good, so I didn't really trim off anything, but that's a quick and easy way to square up pieces where you have snowballed one of the corners. Okay, now we just need to sew our rows together. Follow the diagram in your pattern, but we're going to take the darker square, our lighter left piece, our red and pink left piece, our lighter center square, and then our right pieces and our darker square, and we're just going to sew those together in a row. Now, pressing instructions are to press this outer piece out, so I'm just going to do that first. Okay, we're pressing the center in, and then for these other two, we're going to press them open. So I'm actually going to flip this over so that I can get my fingers in there. And I like, whenever I'm pressing open, I just like to finger press first because I think it just makes life easier than to try and do it while you have a hot iron. And then I always like to flip everything over and give it a nice press from the front. And here we have our two special sashing strips. I will now get my ruler out also and trim these down to 1.5 by 12.5. And now we have all of our sashing strips done and ready to go for when we're assembling our quilt later. All right, everyone, that is going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed our introduction for our Sew With Me series. I look forward to sewing along with you all year long. Your homework for today is to get both bow units done and your sashing units done, including that special sashing. It's really easy to just do all the sashing at once and do all the bows at once. Just make sure you use those two different background fabrics for your bow. Now, if you don't like the bows or you don't want to do the pieced backing, just make one bow for the front, and then you can just do your backing like normal. If you don't want to do the bow on the front, then you can just do plain outer borders, and then instead of making this special sashing unit, you'll just make one extra of the plain sashing unit. Now, the only other thing you would have to do there, because block number 2 will have those bow ribbons hanging down in it, you would just have to swap that out with another block, and you can use another block from this year's sew along, or you can do one of the blocks from one of my previous years. We will also be doing a cross stitch for this year's Sew With Me series as well, and I'm actually going to release it in the same manner I am the quilting. So this week I am releasing the outer border with a bow on top, just like I am for the quilt version. We can get that done, and then next week I'll be releasing block number 1, and then each month we'll just add the next month's block in those spaces inside of our border design. Since it's a new year, I wanted to try something new, so I am actually going to try Classic Colorworks floss for this sew along, but I will have a DMC conversion chart for you as well if you don't want to try that. I know it's a little bit more expensive, and a lot of people have a lot of DMC that they can choose for. So use my colors as a guide, but you're always welcome to pick your own colors as well. I'm going to be stitching mine on 14 count Aida. This is the Charles Craft Antique White color. For the Colorworks floss, I'm going to be using the Caroling for the red, Grasshopper and 4-leaf clover for the greens, Pink Posy for the pink, and then Cocoa Bean and Pebble Beach for the browns. Again, you can use any colors that you like. I just thought it would be fun to try something new this year. I got my floss from Fat Quarter Shop, and last time I checked, they did have all of those colors in stock. So that's it for the floss version. Super short and sweet for this intro video, but you don't really need any other information other than the supplies and that outer border pattern. That PDF will also be linked in the blog post that is linked below this video. That's going to be it for today's launch. As always, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. You can also hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these upcoming releases. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope you guys enjoy this year. That's going to be it for today. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next video for block number 1. We're going to do even more in this year's Sew With Me. They're a lot of fun, and they're a great way to these sampler quilts are a great way to bust through some of your stash.
Oops, I forgot to spit out the water first, so I'm gonna have to dry that.
Really? Jason's making a smoothie. Just take a drink. I'll be using, oh, she dusted. I just got off Vlogmas, so I haven't sewed.